Welcome to this introduction to Greek textual analysis on 2 Peter 1:17. I'm Paul Bucknell with Biblical Foundations for Freedom. As I was doing a study on 2 Peter 1:15 to 21, I was thinking more about the authority of the scripture, and I thought, and I'm sure rightly, that many people really wonder how reliable the scriptures are. Now, there's many angles by which we can attack this, but I only want to teach about textual analysis and introduce this topic here. It's not easy. It is somewhat complicated. And yet, if we put some pictures before you and show how it works with this one verse, maybe you get a better understanding. So I'll give a general introduction of textual analysis and manuscripts for the New Testament, but then I'll be more specific in looking at this one verse. Now, before us is one of the papyrus. It's called Bodmer 8. For papyrus, it's numbered 172 there. From Wikipedia, we can see this page from this manuscript. The web has been such a good help, and AI is even speeding up our understanding and introduction of it. But let me just give you a few pointers. This is one page. So on the left side is the conclusion of 1 Peter, chapter 5. Here it starts 2 Peter, chapter 1. And notice here the letters, that they're all capitals, that there's no space between these letters. There's no punctuation. This is what we call uncials, and it becomes very difficult to read it or understand it because you don't know when a word begins or sentence ends. It becomes very difficult this way. I wanted to introduce this because people can be rather quick to say, well, how did they misspell this? Or how did they think this word or letters go with this word? Well, the reason is because in many of the manuscripts, they are together. And it takes a little skill to actually practice reading something where there's no punctuation. So this is our situation. So from about the beginning of the New Testament, written right up to about the 6th, 7th century, they use these uncials, no punctuations, no small letters, no spaces between the words. This little symbol I have here is the same as this P. It's called the black letter P, but it's fancy, represents very clearly the number manuscript. And the number itself, 172 in this case, comes from when the scholars identified it. This particular scroll would give it a number and catalog it. When we look more particularly at 2 Peter 1:17, I want you to understand here that the verse starts at verse 17 and goes all the way to 18, of course, but we're looking at just one phrase, okay? One phrase. This is my beloved son. That's what this phrase means. Now, when we look in our English, we can see, well, that's what it says, or whatever language you use. But when we look at the Greek, we're going to find that actually it has an apparatus at the bottom where we can actually see, oh, it's not always, not every manuscript will use this phrase. And so we say, oh, in what cases and when does that happen? Well, in my study from 2 Peter 1:15 to 21, there were two phrases that had some doubt about them. It's not doubting what the word means. It's just suggesting that this phrase is differently written in some manuscripts. So this difference in manuscript, or what we call variance, occurs only here in this one phrase. We're looking at Codex A, Alexandria, Codex referring to like a book. It's thicker. So I highlighted it, and that's my highlighting there. So you can see we're only talking, well, in this case, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words. And the uncials, they were one word, right? I just want to introduce two books for you. I have used them decades now. Well, the first one I've used maybe 1 decade less than the other one. It's the majority text, and that they use more of what the King James would use from the Byzantine. And what they talk about by majority is that most of the manuscripts would agree with this. So they go by a lot of manuscripts written in the Byzantine library. They are more accurate. When they have their variants and their description in the bottom, the M, of course, meaning majority, it helps us to understand that they usually would strongly favor the Byzantine, the many manuscripts. But they were written a little later, and we don't have the early ones, and so they don't as much emphasize the early manuscripts like the Western ones would, like the Alexandria, the A that we just looked at. Now, there's another version I want to use, and this is the one right here. I highlighted it, the beginning of the Greek words, and here. So this is where we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it'll be a little bit different in different cases, and I'll show you why it's different in this case. But in the sense that the Greek, here is the Greek, it's all small, small and big letters, is punctuation. So this is modern Greek, and we can read it, even though it's of the old Greek language. Now, if I opened up the page, you'd see that, oh, look at this. This is right here. There's a little 4 footnote down to verse 17, and it says C. In other words, not that sure about what of these 3 or 4 variants is most accurate. They have some question. And that's largely because it's using less reference to the majority of manuscripts and go by early ones instead. So this is the book I was just talking about. So this one I've been using, since Bible school way back, and been learning and studying it. And it's been a great bonus. But the big thing here is that the apparatus is an amazing amount of summary of resources. It tells us where things are. This research is so important and helpful. Each letter, like this, Aleph, stands for one manuscript, okay? In the next slide, I'm going to actually blow this up. And so it's going to be really big. So I'm trying to give you some context before we go there. So here's the 3 variances. I'm first pointing at them in the Greek language. I understand you might not understand that. The one in red, here's the C I talked about. C meaning not very sure about. B down here in verse 21 would be more sure in what they had. So notice Papyrus 72 roll or B, have this particular version. But they're not that confident because why? Because another version, the one in blue here, well, we see that it has many, many more references in the manuscripts. Then there's the green one. This will be our third one. Notice there's only just one P here, okay? And that's why it's not very favored. But in each case, whatever color it is, it's slightly different in lettering in the words that are used. Okay, so we can trust this. Now, this is in Greek. I'm going to be showing you the Greek Romanized here. So in each case, you'll see there's letters that we would use in our English language. So you can read them a little bit. What I did here was to take the Greek word, whole, and then put the English translation, the, underneath. Huios, son, and so forth. And in each case, of mine, of me, this is connected. So there's 2 English words for the one Greek. And it gets a little difficult. But you'll notice here, there's going to be 3 variances that I talked about. Now, the last one I mentioned with the big P, this one right here. and this is the Romanized Greek. So underneath is the literal English. So the word is. At this point, this is just an introduction. I'm actually not evaluating which one is most accurate, though you can see which one most people think would be accurate, except for that one Bible I have that doesn't emphasize the majority text. And so they'll kind of say, well, this is all the same, and they won't support it. However, they did use it. This is the Son of mine, the beloved. The Son of mine, the beloved of mine, he is. Okay. And lastly, this is the Son of mine, the beloved, he is. So there are differences. Does it make a difference? Well, no. They all mean the same. My beloved Son. This is my beloved Son. So it was God speaking about Jesus Christ. They heard that word. So this is important, but it's not important in helping us better understand the text because the meaning is rather obvious. Now, there's some translation issues. If you work with translations, you'll perfectly understand. If you only use one language, you will not understand very much. Well, how come the language changes? And how come there's more than one word for each word? But languages are that way. And so when we interpret them, we have to sometimes manipulate them, juggle them, so that it becomes readable. It becomes something we can easily understand. Now, I found this tips advice, it's translation insights and perspective. It's it's on the web, insights that are offered translators. There's so many translators that they want to provide advice for each verse. And I thought it might be very interesting to read this on 2 Peter 1:17. This is my son, my beloved. Okay, this is the phrase we're talking about. Is the wording in many important Greek manuscripts as the Revised Standard Version footnote makes clear, while some others have my beloved son. And translating this, however, there may not be that much difference between the two versions of the text, since they practically come out the same in the translation. In many languages, for instance, it is not natural to say, my son, my beloved, as in English. It's very awkward. But it is perfectly natural to say, my beloved son. So we don't restate that my 2 times, right? Or my son, whom I love. Those are fine. The adjustments made will be translational decisions rather than decisions based on the text and its interpretation. Well, hopefully this gives you a little feel for the difficulty translators have when they are interpreting, and sometimes why we have variants, because often even then they would be using a different language and translating it and maybe get a little confused, or if they're looking at it, says this couldn't be this way. No one says it this way, but actually maybe in the Greek it was. However, the meaning is the same. Let me just go through a few summary points. There are thousands of New Testament manuscripts, some whole, but there are many more in fragments and parts. The New Testament, what we would just have as the New Testament Bible, is a compilation. It's going through the different manuscripts and seeing which is the most faithful representation. And we can trust that. And if you want to study it, now all the resources are up and available for us to use. There are no significant doctrinal differences evident in the variances, like today's in 2 Peter 1:17. Although there are non-canonical books that are anti-gospel, and some of those are based on later on Gnostic books that were written, and they are coming with a certain mindset, philosophy of what we call Gnosticism. It's a cult, and they were emphasizing that Jesus could not have come in the flesh. You go to 1 John, you read more about that. I don't have time to talk about it here. But that will influence writing and therefore make their books obviously not Christian. The great number of manuscripts that we have and small differences assure us that we are close to the autographs of the original ones that we don't have, the original 2 Peter 1:17. We have many around it, and so we can kind of zero in, this is probably the most likely one. But it's not going to make a difference in doctrine. It's just what words originally were used. These differences are open for all to study, seen in the apparatus of the Greek New Testaments that I showed you. They're there, they're easy to read, and with a little study, you can be quick in learning which is the best. Would I say C here? And which version to use? No, I don't think so. I would say B. But it doesn't really matter too much because, again, the English would come out to be the same. I'm Paul Bucknell, glad to be with you. Hopefully you can join us. This is Biblical Foundations for Freedom, www.bffbible.org.